This video is going to pick up where my last video left off. In my last video, I said that Dalton Trumbo spent a year in jail. He spent a year in jail because of McCarthyism. McCarthyism was a political era where Americans feared that communists were sneaking into the country and taking over important professions. One big fear was that communists had snuck into Hollywood and were sneaking communist values into the plots of movies and thus into the minds of Americans. Now, at the time, Dalton Trumbo is the highest paid writer in Hollywood, as well as a communist.
Would you like one, sir? We're communists.
He's a writer.
You won't get any takers, not here anyway.
Oh, why's that? All it says is that Congress has no right to investigate how we vote, or where we pray, what we think, say, or how we make movies. Hello, I'm Dalton Trumbo.
Dalton Trumbo was eventually brought in front of the committee and questioned about his politics. He could have pled the Fifth Amendment, which is the protection against self-incrimination. Instead, he pled the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. He said that he had the right to believe whatever he wanted and believe in whatever political party he wanted. He said nobody can indict opinion or criminalize your thoughts.
No, you know what it is? I don't trust you.
Well, I'd say go on, but I'm afraid you will.
Look, I know what I am, okay? I want this whole country to be different, top to bottom. If I get what I want, nobody gets their own lake.
Well, that would be a very dull life, don't
Yeah,
you think?
for you, not for the guys who built this. If I'm wrong, tell me, but ever since I've known you, you talk like a radical, but you live like a rich guy.
That is true.
Well, I don't think you're willing to lose all of this just to do the right thing.
Well, I despise martyrdom, and I won't fight for a lost cause. So you're right. I'm not willing to lose it all. Certainly not them. But I am willing to risk it all. That's where the radical and the rich guy make a perfect combination. The radical may fight with the purity of Jesus, but the rich guy wins with the cunning of Satan.
Oh, shit.
What?
Just please shut up. Please. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't say shit like that anymore.
I can't guarantee that.
Trumbo liked his freedom of speech. Before McCarthyism, Trumbo was not only Hollywood's most paid writer, but he was the only writer to not have a morality clause. A morality clause was a clause in the contract between the studio and the writer that said the studio was allowed to fire the writer if the writer was involved in a public scandal outside of work. For instance, if he cheated on his wife or if he fathered his son outside of the marriage. Dalton refused to sign this, and because his talent was so great and the demand for his work was so high, he was able to get this clause removed. Of course, when McCarthyism and the Red Scare happened, he was fired anyway. Dalton was among many writers and Hollywood professionals who were banned from their profession. They were put on a blacklist, and this blacklist lasted for over 10 years.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Often, when I stand before the film community, there's an elephant in the room, me. And I thought I would address that. The blacklist was a time of evil, and no one who survived it came through untouched by evil. Caught in a situation that had passed beyond the control of mere individuals,
Each person reacted as his nature, his needs, his convictions, and his particular circumstances compelled him to. It was a time of fear, and no one was exempt. Scores of people lost their homes. Their families disintegrated. They lost. And in some even lost their lives. But when you look back upon that dark time, as I think you should every now and then, it will do you no good to search for heroes or villains. There weren't any. There were only victims. Victims, because each of us felt compelled to say or do things that we otherwise would not, to deliver or receive wounds which we truly did not wish to exchange. I look out to my family sitting there, and I realize what I've put them through. And it's unfair. My wife, who somehow kept it all together, amazes me. And so, what I say here tonight is not intended to be hurtful to anyone. It is intended to heal the hurt, to repair the wounds which for years have been inflicted upon each other, and most egregiously upon ourselves. Thank you. Thank you kindly.
There ain't nothing I can do.
While Dalton was blacklisted, he continued to write movie scripts and get paid for them by writing under a pseudonym, a fake name. Under the name Robert Rich, he went on to win an Academy Award for his movie The Brave One.
Nominations for Best Motion Picture Story are Robert Rich for The Brave One, Leo Katcher for the Eddie Duchin story, Jean-Paul Sartre for The Proud and the Beautiful, and Cesare Zavattini for Umberto D. The envelope, please. The Brave One, Robert Rich. Lasky Jr., as Vice President of the Screenwriters Branch of the Writers Guild, will accept the award for Mr. Rich.
On behalf of...
Robert Rich is the first person to have an unclaimed Academy Award.
I must say that the whole uproar over Robert Rich 2 years ago was really not the Academy's fault. They voted the award. They had it on hand physically. They tried to present it. They tried to find someone to give it to, and I didn't arrive. I assume they still have it, and I imagine if they consider me qualified, that they, in their time and in their way, will make arrangements to confer it.
If you receive the Oscar, what do you intend to do with it?
Well, I have a daughter, 13 years old. I've been blacklisted since she was 3. She's known the title of every motion picture I've written in this study. and she's kept that title secret. She's been a soldier. When her friends say to her, as children do, my father does so-and-so, what does your father do? This has confronted her with a very real problem. It confronts her with the problem, and has since she was 3, of who her father really is, and what her father really does. I think I will give this Oscar, if I get it, to that girl. I think I will tell her, well, here is one secret you no longer need to be burdened with. I'll tell her we have our names back again.
If you are a creative person who wants to make a living with their creativity, then I suggest you study Dalton Trumbo. He has lots of lessons to teach. For instance, his focus on art. Listen to how he answers this interviewer. The interviewer asks him, would he ever work with some of the people who outed him as a communist?
A top screenwriter who served a year in prison for contempt of Congress. Now that the secret is out, I asked Trumbo if he returns to open employment in Hollywood, would he be willing to work with some of the people who have bitterly attacked film industry communists and left-wingers? Would he, for instance, work with Ward Bond or Adolph Manju?
Well, I don't agree with these people, with their opinions, but I have worked with both of them. I did a remake of A Bill of Divorcement with Adolph Manju, and I did A Guy Named Joe with Ward Bond, and I would do it again. They're excellent actors. The test of an actor is acting, not what he believes, not his politics.
Do you still contend that your political beliefs and associations and activities are your business and no one else's?
Oh, yes, of course.
You may like Dalton's work if you are a pacifist or if you are anti-war. Dalton has a book called Johnny Got His Gun, and the book is about a soldier who's hit by a grenade, loses both of his arms, his legs, and the use of his face. He's just a torso and a mind. Now, Dalton directed the book into a movie. He made it into a movie, and it's very good, dramatic, at times hard to watch. There's a scene where Johnny has to realize that he is in a hospital and badly injured, and that he's not dreaming or in purgatory or limbo. The doctor's doing surgery on his arm, and given the position of the scalpel, Johnny can tell that he must no longer have an arm. There's another scene where Johnny is trying to keep track of how many days he's been in the hospital. He imagines in his head the chalkboard and Roman numerals in the corner. And when the nurse opens the blinds for the day, the sun comes in and he can feel the temperature difference on his body. You're probably not ever going to read this book or watch the movie, so I'm going to spoil the ending for you. And if you don't want to hear it, zoom ahead to another point in the video. All the while, the army thinks that Johnny is a vegetable, so they're keeping him alive for medical purposes. Through Morse code, a nurse discovers that Johnny is conscious, and she brings in the army generals and the army doctors and says, "We must talk to this man. He's alive." The generals say, "What do you want?" And Johnny says, he comes up with the idea, "I want to be wheeled from school to school, from hospital to hospital, to show people the consequences of war. I want to show people how badly some soldiers are injured. I want to be useful, and I want to get fresh air." The army general says, "No, we're not going to do that. Your condition is so bad that we can't move you." Johnny says, "If I can't be useful, kill me." The room gets uncomfortable. The nurse starts to cry, and the army general says, "This man is hysterical. Clearly, let's ask him his name." Johnny says, "My name is Kill Me." And then the credits roll. The movie ends. The movie ends with the army generals refusing to let Johnny be a symbol of war or kill him. Now listen to this interview of Dalton explaining why he wrote this book and his reasoning behind choosing Johnny to be the subject. By the way, the title, Johnny Got His Gun, is a reference to the popular phrase, "Johnny, get your gun." Johnny, get your gun is a patriotic yell that was supposed to encourage young men to enlist in the army. Dalton's book, Johnny Got His Gun, is about what happens now that Johnny is armed.
However, the intellectual appeal against war has never worked. It is the great sages and scientists and philosophers for thousands of years have been telling us war is madness. As an intellectual concept, it is madness. Yet the first time an emotional event occurs in history, we all go off to war.
That's right. And every time we stand up at a baseball game or football game, or like last night at the Hollywood Bowl, sir, everybody to a man stood up on their feet and they sang with the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, where we canonize war, where we are proud of our wars. Do you have any observations on that kind of philosophy?
Well, you see, that is an emotion which I think can be overcome only by a counter-emotion. And that is why I did Johnny Got His Gun the way I did it, as an appeal to the emotions. Since the emotions are what carry us into war, perhaps they can keep us out.
You took a theme for your story. First off, you wrote this back in 1938, as I said, which was about the First World War, the war to make the world safe for democracy, the war to end all wars, if you will.
A just and lasting peace.
A just and lasting peace, and we all know that we've had a just and lasting peace in this country since then, haven't we, sir?
About 6 months.
Yes, I don't even know if we can give it 6 months, but there's been constant war ever since the First World War, maybe before that probably, but in modern times. But you took a theme where there probably have been thousands of people who have found themselves in this position and have been unable to communicate with the outside world. The man, Joe Bono, I believe his name is? Played by Timothy Bottoms.
Yes.
Right? He had his face totally obliterated by a mortar shell or whatever it might be. His arms were gone, his legs were gone. He was just a torso. That's all that was left, and his mind was not affected. And he couldn't communicate with the outside world. And the pressures and the pain and the torture and the introspection and the screaming out for help is very difficult to put down in the printed word in a book. And I wonder why you selected that particular type of a casualty to tell your story about anti-war.
Well, of course, war is man's most extreme action. And I wanted to select a statistic which is the result of war, which was equally extreme. You see, we read of 300,000 wounded men in this last war, 12.5% of whom, or 37,500, are totally incapacitated, totally disabled. But we never think what that means because it's a statistic. 300 people go down on an airplane, it's a statistic. But the life of one man, see, we have no war in this picture, 1.5 minutes of war.
Really?
And the result of war is reflected in the life of one man who is struggling to return to humanity and never stops struggling, struck me as a theme which said something about the human capacity to persist and at the same time about the horror which always is the result of war.
You've been very active in peace groups and attempting to stop the insanity of war probably most of your adult life, Mr. Trumbo. Because of this, many people have called you everything from communist to un-American. I would like to talk about the philosophy of that kind of thinking after we come back from these commercials and see what your point of view now is after your picture is coming out. Johnny's Got His Gun. We'll be right back.
What eventually got Dalton back into Hollywood was two things. Dalton was an incredibly talented writer who refused to find another profession, wrote with fake names, and won Academy Awards. He got himself back into Hollywood. The other thing that got him back was a director named Otto Preminger. Otto hired Dalton to write the script for Exodus, a movie about Jews who were inmates and were escaping on a cargo ship. Otto credited Dalton with his full real name in the movie, and this was the first time Dalton was credited as a writer for 10 years. The film that I'm going to talk to you today about is also directed by Otto Preminger, and it's called Anatomy of a Murder.
What do you say there, Counselor?
Say it away. What's in the brown paper bag?
That might be a cabbage head.
But it wouldn't be.
Yeah, you're a very suspicious man.
True, I'm lastingly suspicious of and or fascinated by the contents of brown paper bags. Shall I sneak a peek?
You do that, Counselor. You do that. After you sneak a peek, why, you uncork whatever you find.
This is one of my favorite films of all time, and it's listed by the American Bar Association as the 4th best legal film of all time. The first being To Kill a Mockingbird. The second is 12 Angry Men. The third is My Cousin Vinny. And the fourth is the Otto Preminger directed Anatomy of a Murder. The story is about a lieutenant who shoots a bartender because the bartender raped his wife. The movie is 3 hours long and depicts a realistic judicial process. There are objections and witnesses and legal trickery. Otto Preminger was famous for dealing with taboo subjects. His movie Man with the Golden Arm depicts a young Frank Sinatra as a heroin addict who is trying to recover. The title Man with a Golden Arm has to do with Frank's aspiration to be a professional drummer, his profession as a illegal card dealer, and his addiction to heroin and the needle. The taboo subject that Anatomy of a Murder deals with is rape and victim blaming.
Would you mind taking your glasses off, Miss Mannion? Gee whiz, Barney Quill do that to you?
Mm-hmm. More than that. You should see all over.
Well, you can put it back on if it's more comfortable for you.
Mrs. Mannion is a beautiful woman who flirts and dresses well. The movie walks the line perfectly. It pushes her sexuality and keeps asking the viewer, do you believe her?
Does he have reason to be jealous?
He was jealous even before we were married. I should have known how it would be. It's funny, though. He likes to show me off. He likes me to dress the way I do. And then he gets furious if a man pays any attention to me. I've tried to leave him, but I can't. He begs. I give in.
Well, now, if you think I've forgotten my question, I haven't.
I have.
All right. All right, then I'll ask it again. Does your husband have any reason to be jealous?
No. Not once. Not ever.
This is great writing. Cheating is implied. With a worse writer, you might have had Mrs. Mannion beat around the bush and say, Jealous of what? And then Mr. Beegler would have to be direct and say cheating. Instead, they're both professionals. He is a professional lawyer, and she is a professional, beautiful person. And what you get from that mix is beautiful banter.
All right, then I'll ask it again. Does your husband have any reason to be jealous?
No. Not once. Not ever.
The prosecutors relentlessly depict Mrs. Mannion as a flirt who brought this on herself, and that the bartender, good old Barney, was a nice guy hooked by a temptress.
Considering the tight skirt and the tight sweater and the bare legs, what was the result in her appearance? Well, would you say that Mrs. Mannion's appearance was deliberately voluptuous and enticing?
You could pretty much see everything she had.
Your Honor, the defense will concede that Mrs. Mannion, when dressed informally, is an astonishingly beautiful woman. And well, Miss Mann, stand up, please, will you? As a matter of fact, take your glass off. As a matter of fact, it's pretty easy to understand why her husband became temporarily deranged when he saw such beauty bruised and torn by a beast.
Your Honor, I protest.
Mr. Mannion's lawyer, Paul Beegler, has his hands full too.
See you later, Pie.
Okay.
Did you get my phone message?
Yeah, but I got busy.
Why haven't you been to see your husband?
Oh, now I don't see why I have to see him every day.
I think it'd be a very good idea if you did.
All right, I'll see him every day, okay?
No, not okay. Now, where's your car?
I came with them.
All right, mine's right over here. Come on.
Hey, now, wait a second. I got friends inside.
Friends or no friends, you're going home.
Hey, now, who do you think you are?
Look, I'm the lawyer trying to feed a rap for your husband. You remember?
Oh, what's that got to do
wait,
with...
Now, you listen. Now, you listen. Now, until this trial's over, you're going to be a meek little housewife with horn-rimmed spectacles. And you're going to stay away from men and juke joints and booze and pinball machines, and you're going to wear a skirt and low-heeled shoes, and you're going to wear a girdle, and especially a girdle. Look, Laura, believe me, I don't usually complain of an attractive jiggle, but just you save that jiggle for your husband to look at if and when I get him out of jail. Now, come on, now let's go.
For those of you who like law and reasoning, this movie is a jewel. First, the lawyer is played by Jimmy Stewart, who has to introduce rape into the trial. The trial is about Mr. Mannion murdering the bartender, so the rape is not immediately obvious.
Now, let's see how really bright you can be.
Well, I'm working at it.
All right, now, because your wife was raped, you'll have a favorable atmosphere in the courtroom. The sympathy will be with you, if all the facts are true. What you need is a legal peg so that the jury can hang up their sympathy in your behalf. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
What's your legal excuse, Lieutenant? What's your legal excuse for killing Barney Quill?
Not justification, huh?
Not justification.
Excuse. Just excuse.
Well, what excuses are there?
How should I know? You're the one that plugged Quill.
Well, I must have been mad.
How's that?
I said I must have been mad.
Well, bad temper's no excuse.
Well, I mean, I must have been crazy. Am I getting warmer?
Once the plea of insanity is arrived at, there are legal maneuvering that Mr. Beegler has to go through in order to introduce the rape to the trial.
How can the jury accurately estimate the testimony being given here unless they first know the reason behind this whole trial? Why Lieutenant Mannion shot Barney Quill? Now, the prosecution would like to separate the motive from the act. Well, Well, that's like trying to take the core from an apple without breaking the skin. Well, now, the core of our defense is that the defendant's temporary insanity was triggered by this so-called trouble with Quill. And I begged the court, I begged the court to let me cut into the apple.
This is as good as I've ever seen it. The writing is perfect, long, mature, and funny.
Can't somebody say something?
What do you want me to say, Maida, darling?
Tell me we're going to win. I'm counting on getting that promissory note from the lieutenant. I hope we can borrow some money on it. I need a new typewriter. Half the time, the P and the F don't strike on mine. Party of the first part sometimes comes out arty of the start. Doesn't make sense. It's embarrassing.
Artie of the art? I kind of like that. Had a ring to it.
12 people go off into a room. 12 different minds, 12 different hearts, from 12 different walks of life. 12 sets of eyes, ears, shapes, and sizes. And these 12 people are asked to judge another human being as different from them as they are from each other. And in their judgment, they must become of one mind, unanimous. It's one of the miracles of man's disorganized soul that they can do it. In most instances, do it right well. God bless juries.